With
Yes, we are starting now. I welcome you all to another lecture series of School of Art and Architecture, Sushant University today. I welcome our speakers for the day, Anupam, Bansal and Rajesh Dongre, partners at ABRD, Atelier for Built Environment Research and Design. ABRD was founded in 1996 and incorporated in 2000 by Anupam Bansal and Rajesh Dongre. They aspire to create conscious designs. Their studio follows an evolutionary approach of design. Their solutions emerge as a response to local context and natural environment. They believe in crafting and co-creating built environments that facilitate well-being. At the threshold of the next decade, ABRD is transforming from a personality-driven practice to an idea-driven platform. With this new vision, they have started the ABRD firm, and their studio is now proactively undertaking collaborative projects and research initiatives to create innovative and sustainable solutions. One of the projects is the campus project, which they'll be introducing to us today. Both Anupam and Rajesh have taught at Sushant School of Art and Architecture back in 2003 to 2005. So I congratulate them for this, and they have actually contributed to our faculty pool. And both have a master's in urban design from different institutes, and have been working on various landmark projects everywhere. And Rajesh right now is the secretary for IUDI DNCR. And both Anupam and Rajesh have been seen at various talks, walks, and discussions at various platforms and institutes. So I welcome you both to introduce the campus design project and take the talk from here, please. You can share your screen. Thank you.
Sir, you are on mute. Sir, please. सर म्यूट है आपका.
okay, can you all hear us now?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, students, faculty members, and other guests who are joining online. So we are here to present a project that we've been working on from 2011 onwards. We'll come to the dashboard as we go along with the presentation. And the project for South Asian University, which is located in Maidangari village in New Delhi. Our firm and another partner firm from Nepal, who are also inmates and college mates from School of Planning and Architecture. So we formed in 2010 when the competition was held, and ever since we've been it was a company already. constructed by after and also maybe and made is with Paresh and Sanjay Bahadur Thapa, who are our college mates from SPA. Sanjay, incidentally, was our classmate, and Paresh was a few years senior to us. And hence, I think a project of this magnitude, firstly, we had 4 urban designers and the principals of the joint venture, but also it's a multidisciplinary team which comprises of landscape architects, engineers, sustainability specialists, and everybody kind of brings their entire expertise to make a robust and engineered scheme. And the point that we are trying to emphasize, since there are so many different layers which you can unravel of any campus design, but definitely good urban design translates into architecture, and that is one of the emphasis of this entire presentation. So, what are educational cities or educational campuses? And we kind of have been in the domain of institutions and educational campuses for almost about last 15 years. In some way or another, way back we started our practice in 2001. We did the Alliance Française, which was an educational institution of a different nature. Then we did the National Center for Biological Sciences, which was another educational come research and development center. And then we came to South Asian University. And it has been acquired learning over the years, where we've been studying institutions, we've been studying campuses, and we are just taking you through some of the examples of campuses existing around the world to just put things in a perspective and also understand that how campuses really are located within cities, within peri-urban areas, or absolutely rural areas in some cases. So historic cities such as Varanasi, Ujjain, Constantinople, Rome, Oxford, Cambridge have known as knowledge economy, where education and learning was the resident of the city. Post-independence has seen considerable growth of educational campuses to almost 1,000 universities and 40,000 colleges in India. So there's we are still way behind what we really need. So this is going to be always a thrust area for our country, because the entire demand for education, particularly higher education, is so much that the sheer numbers will really put a lot of thrust on this sector of educational development. So in terms of context, you will find all across the world that you'll see peri-urban campuses development leading to ad hoc transformations of rural land into urban land. I mean, a case of example is JNU and IIT, which was established in 1960s, which were really peri-urban to start with, but have now got surrounded by urban fabric all around. There now one doesn't realize that at some point of time they were so much outside the city. And what is to note is obviously the fact that how there is no kind of a connect with the rest of the city, and how over the years, particularly with the kind of security and other concerns coming in, these have started to become very insulated campuses and isolated campuses. As a build-up to our project, we went through lots of universities, not only through case studies on the net and literature study, but we also looked at physically visited several universities, particularly in Hong Kong, Shenzhen, China, different parts of China, and this was a city. This was a example of Chinese University of Hong Kong, which is again located pretty much outside Hong Kong, though you see a lot of buildings, but when it was built in the 60s, it was almost like a verdant green area located on mountain slopes overlooking the sea. And it is the fact that campuses are isolated is not something new to India as well, but happens all across the country. So all across the world. And even though the landscape here is stunning and you can see across the city, the fact of the matter is that there are no real connections or active linkages with the city. Some examples of how developments have continued in universities, where you can see modern buildings which were made in the 60s and 70s on the lower side, and new developments, new typologies and new building materials and new building types coming into play over the years. Another university actually was Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, again located slightly outside Hong Kong, but also it was a very interesting university campus because it was a very compact campus located on a very, very steep topographical land overlooking the sea. Again, I mean, this is the difference we have between universities and where the context is not so scenic. But and the interesting idea, at least in this university, was it had a very strong visual linkage and as well as compact development, which you can see in built environment on the side on that side. This is a view of the university from the oceanfront. You can see that how it integrates into the sea body. You see the academic building and all the faculties located on the higher ground of profile. All the housing, building, on lower ends of the campus, closer to the port station, the ditch back, etc. is all located. It is to the ocean. Studies of universities also does look at Boston, and all these universities are very different from where used to be where are located. edition, I think about last year, or it just got opened very recently. So cities, universities are actually places which continue to transform, continue to grow, continue to expand. And in that sense, they are very interesting, projects to work on. MIT again, which is, I've already mentioned about the fact that, again, MIT and Boston, MIT and Harvard are really very unique examples because they have, in a sense, blurred the boundary between the city and the university. So, you continue to experience the city or the university. So there is no real clear distinction. And even in MIT, there is continuing development where, the red outline mark is all now put up for new development, and they're going through intense amount of transformations. So these are some images of different buildings, landmark buildings, which have been being built in MIT over the years. On the leftmost photograph is of Brain and Cognitive Science building, which was actually designed conceptually, at least, by Charles Correa, and then kind of taken over by local architects in MIT. This is the example of Stanford University, which is like a mega campus of 8,000 acres. I mean, the campus itself is at this moment much smaller, but out of 8,000 acres, probably it only occupies about maybe 500 acres or 600 acres. But the rest of the land is all of Stanford, and this is a very landmark university. Again, we had the opportunity to visit and look at how the university really works, what kind of different functions are being integrated, and how they continue to transform and develop. That's the main building of the Stanford University, which is the main quadrangle where you enter. You have very classical buildings which were built at least about 125 years back through a master plan that was done by Olmsted in 1888. And on the right, you can see newer development, which continues to really redefine the character of the university, and also impart to it, or continues to impart to it, a new character and a new kind of a feel to it. So one of the projects that we looked at in much greater detail when we were designing the National Center for Biological Sciences was the Science and Engineering Quad. And here again, the whole idea of the idea of this development was that how the university can kind of enhance and focus more on interaction and bringing people together from different parts of a large campus. So this was a building that we looked at much in detail, and this was the Clark Center, which was developed under a program called BioX. And the whole idea was, again, to really make a multidisciplinary hub in the 20th century or the 21st century, where people come together, people are able to meet each other, and not only that, but the research and all the program that develops here is visible to people who are moving in the campus. So you can see the diagram on the right. It shows that the entire building is really conceived as 3 blocks so that it really invites people from all directions, and the central space becomes a space for meeting. The entire ground floor is an activated space because you have a large cafeteria and then 2 laboratories, which are multidisciplinary laboratories. The idea was that research becomes visible. People, so while you walk down into the center, you can see some very, very advanced robotics research going on in one laboratory. You can see very, very high-end life sciences research going on in another. So if every person who really passes through the building, he really gets to experience what's happening inside. I mean, this is a really great example on how they have really activated the entire, campus through an intervention, which is really not a very big intervention, but a small intervention. And the oval shape that you see is an open air and an underground theater. So this is where supposedly everybody can meet, they can host events, they can have cultural events. So this is the kind of thought that is now really prevalent in university campuses. This is some pictures of the buildings, and you can see the internal facades, which are really transparent. And these are all actually flexible laboratories. They don't have a fixed layout. You can transform laboratories suited to each one's research requirements. And it's a multidisciplinary research, so you can have a robotic guy working with a life sciences guy, working with a chemistry guy. So everybody and each and every person is really invited to be a part of this program and then conduct research in a very open and visible environment. Brings us to a little bit back to India and what is our context. And you can see a quick comparative of I think this slide almost illustrates the kind of dilemma of, not really dilemma, but the kind of pressure that, development pressure that we encounter now. Way back in 60s when JNU was developed, it was a 1,000-acre campus envisaged for a student strength of 5,500. Indian Institute of Technology site area of 320 acres for 5,000. But South Asian University on the right, you can see at the same scale is a 100-acre campus for 5,000 students. So you can see a transition of how densities are really being compressed and land is becoming a precious resource. And, things are really getting squeezed down. So Rajesh will take over from here and run you through the entire competition, our concept, and as well as where we are in terms of the project. Thank you.
So that was the jury. One of the reasons for participating in the competition was a good jury. Besides that, it was a project, a South Asian project, so, and we had nurtured this dream of collaborating with our friends in Nepal, whom we had been thinking of setting up a studio together. So the main reason why our team got selected was, as you can see in the jury comment, was that the jury commended the design on its well-articulated zoning and land use. And also they appreciated the fact that the natural topography was very well integrated into the university functions and the campus structure. So there you see on the left is the map of Delhi, where the university campus is located right at the southern tip of the city. The landmarks close to us are IGNOU campus, which happens to be just across a few hundred meters to our north, where number 2 is written is the residential complex of IGNOU. Another big landmark close to our site is the Asola Wildlife Sanctuary. In fact, one of the edges of the sanctuary is abutting our site. The edges towards the west and towards the south of our plot are typical houses and a village called Rajpur Khurd. So it was a kind of a context that we had to imagine for this site, that what it would be over the years, and then we responded to those edges. Here you can see a close-up map. So there is a 100-meter wide master plan road proposed on the northern side of the road. But as we understood during the design process, that this road is very unlikely to come up, because this road can pass through wildlife. That the road would extend towards the main road, and all around the campus of the road would expand to a 30-meter width, which means on our southern side and on our right, a lot of it on the blocks. The terrain of the site is also in these slides. The area is known as, part of our site is also known as the geometry. And interestingly, those are areas which we could in our design and integrate the landscape areas. So we were debating the South Asian and what to be managed in university. We also design what should they determine environment. So we realized from examples like any North Indian village where almost 90% of the year's rainfall comes in 2 months. So this is what leads to conservation of water and very, very sensitive usage of that water through the rest of the year. So this sort of became an important part of our sustainability strategy, and reuse of water and integration, in fact, rather designing the scheme around water channels and drainage patterns became the main determinant of the design. The second thing we realized was making this design very eco-sensitive and sustainable. So some principles that we came up to was to make the belt form very, very dense, and this would help us to consolidate very large open spaces. Another thing we realized from traditional South Asian architecture was interconnections, linkages between various functions, and the way these connections and linkages lead to creation of different types of vistas and giving the users multiple options of circulation. So every academic building in our project came up with the idea of a courtyard. I mean, the academic building is like a building typology which kept repeating because we have almost 14 faculties. Then there were buildings such as the auditoriums and cafeterias, which were located at the lower level of the buildings, which would encourage a lot of public usage and free movement of people from these spaces within the building to the connector spines and to the pedestrian tracks and so on. One more aspect which became like a design principle was within the campus we kept all the buildings right on the street edge. So it sort of lent a urban character to all the buildings in the campus. Finally, coming towards the vocabulary of architecture, we realized that we debated a lot, and we realized that it would not be appropriate to follow any style or any particular vocabulary of architecture. Rather, we kept our building facades and orientations and fenestration to follow the tenets of climatic considerations. Apart from that, we also followed a systems approach towards standardization of structural grids, of movement systems within the buildings, and movement systems which were built around natural systems. We also followed this systems approach even down to the elements of facades, shading devices, and using modular facades for most of our buildings, academic buildings. So there you see a diagram of how we arrived at the zoning. And the idea here was to insert, we were going to be, the university is a fairly large program with about 5,000 students living on campus, about 400 faculty houses, and an academic zone. So here you can see that as an approach, we created a very large central green, which was continuously linked to the Asola Wildlife Sanctuary on the eastern part of the site. The students' hostel were located towards the north, because that is the only area which is inaccessible to a public front of the city. Another reason for keeping the hostel was that they would be least disturbed in that zone. Faculty housing again was located in a part of the site which was not very visible, and yet it had an independent option of independent entry and exit. And the pink zone you see is the academic zone, where all the academic and administrative functions of the university were located. Along with that came location of strategically locating our nodal points in each zone. So every hostel building, especially one which is the hostels which are facing towards the central green, have a very, very free moving ground floor, and all the public functions like the hostel mess, dining halls, gymnasium are located at the ground level. Similarly, in the academic zone, the auditoriums and cafeterias are located on the ground level. And in the housing blocks, the idea of housing courtyards are there, so that every housing has its own intimate environment, and then they open out onto the functions like the club and guest house. So here you can also see the bold red line, which is a sort of connector spine between all these three zones, and which is non-vehicular in nature. Besides that, the main yellow line is the main motorable access way, where we even envisage that a public transportation vehicle would be allowed to come into the campus, so that you have the option of taking a shared taxi or a shared auto directly to the nearest metro station from here, from within the campus. So here you see the master plan. This is a master plan which we finally arrived at. So it's a very, very complex web of connections and linkages. Every building or every function is accessible by a cycle track, by a pedestrian walkway, and of course towards the periphery is the vehicular access. So there is a continuous linear strip which is connecting all the buildings together with a pedestrian and a cycle track. So these sketches by Akshay Kaul explain, what was the prime determinant in terms of locating the central green in the center of the campus. So it was the hydrology. The highest point of the site happens to be towards the northwest. And we collected all the water through a complex web of drainage channels into a rainwater harvesting pond into the center. And as the landscape principle, along with these drainage channels came up our green areas. So there you see the dark green is where all the 15 acre of large central green is located, which we named as Sau Vanya. And the blue is where all the rainwater is going to be collected in form of a rainwater harvesting pond. So these are again sketches which indicate how the rainwater, even the roof water, is going to be collected into rainwater harvesting channels. And instead of making these channels impervious, every rainwater channel is first connected into a small rainwater harvesting pit, and only the overflow of the pit goes into the stormwater drain and finally comes into the central collection pond. So the idea being there is a good content of moisture which is allowed to be retained into the ground where the buildings are located or where exactly the water falls. So it follows the mantra, catch water where it falls. So that's the final scheme. All the blue small dots that you see are the rainwater harvesting pits that we have created. So this is a very unique scheme where we have, where we are going to have almost 1,000 rainwater harvesting pits throughout the site. We had to get this scheme approved by SDMC and through Jal Board and so many other agencies, and they all commended this scheme that this is probably the first example where this is being followed. Usually the norm used to be that for every 1 acre of site, you make about one rainwater harvesting pit, or 2 or 3 acres, you make one rainwater harvesting tank. Whereas over here, we have almost 1,000 of them. So these red lines are indicating the vehicular circulation, which is towards the periphery. The smaller red lines are traffic, which would be very, very low in movement, because the main roads are also at the back, and also the ramp entry into the building are towards the back. So these are the pedestrian networks and cycle tracks. You can see that there are multiple options. So if a student needs to walk from the hostel to an academic building, there is always the option available of taking a shortcut through the Sau Vanya. Option of cycling it, where you see the big circular nodes connecting the buildings. Every building entry would have especially towards the cycle track, would have a cycle parking where they come and bring their cycles into designated parking lots and then access the building from there. You can also see on the diagram on the left, the proposal has two level parking structures proposed, which are within 3 or 4 minute walking distance from each every part of the city. So in case we run out of parking spaces, the university can take up construction of these multi-level parking structures and north-south kind of a patch is for 4 apartment blocks of 416 apartments for faculty and staff. Towards the east and south are the 12 faculty buildings located. That's another view from the east showing how the Asola Wildlife Sanctuary connects to the central green with no interruption of any building or any other built infrastructure. Some more images of the 3 zones distinctly showing on our site plan. So apart from these zonings, we also, like I had mentioned earlier, we proposed certain activity nodes and proposed these activities, which were like the major anchor points or the activity nodes of the university. So overlooking the rainwater harvesting pond is what, we proposed something called the SAARC Heart, which would have eating joints from all the 8 SAARC countries, and which would allow for not only the students and faculty to come and eat here, but even the city dwellers to come into the university and experience the cuisine of South Asian countries. Then the space located between the library and the SAARC Institute was the main SAARC Plaza, which was the sort of a form university, again overlooking the green. And a section, which we call the promenade, which was overlooking the lake on one side and the academic zone on the southern side. Some more images of these spaces. So one of the important space in the academic zone is the open air theatre, which can have a gathering of almost 2,000 to 3,000 students, because it's been designed in a way that it can expand into non-vehicular circulation spaces as well. So that's an aerial view. I'm going to play the videos a little later of what is built of the university. So that's the final master plan. I will not give you names in each and every building, but yeah, you can see that, all the buildings in pink color are the academic buildings. The yellow buildings are students' housing and the faculty housing, and the Sau Vanya and all the other plantation. In the green is, in fact, the plantation is throughout the site with a very, very high density in the Sau Vanya. So the next few slides are going to be running you through some diagrams or sketches that we have done over during the design phase to sort of how we came to the structure of the master plan. So first idea was to locate our water features and how through a system of swales, bioswales and check dams to bring them into the central rainwater harvesting collecting lake. Then came the built form, and then the networks and circulations, and the vehicular circulation, which was kept to the periphery of the campus, plantation layer. So now, like Anupam mentioned, almost 50% of the university project has been completed, put to construction, and that's the academic zone that you see. So we have, out of the 12 faculty, about 7 faculty buildings which have already been built, and you see all the housing blocks
parking, and we it because it's of constructing so many basements and also providing this gives you an aerial view of how the spine is between the two buildings. These are two identical typologies, and then you see a Faculty of Life Science and Earth Science, and then the convention center in the background and the utility much in the background. This is a convention center which has actually this has been one of the interesting programs of the university to really build an opportunity where at least people from the city would be coming from time to time for conferences, for events. And so it has a 750 seater capacity auditorium, which you see being constructed right on the top. You see the roof. It's without the roof right now. And right behind that is Faculty of Art and Design. So combined together, they make a very interesting hub of activities which are oriented towards art, exhibitions, art galleries, banquets, and convention centers. So, we emphasize that this will be the real active hub of the university at some point of time. Some more views of the convention center, and you can also see the open air theater in the towards the left of the. So to combine together, that's a really active. These are some pictures, recent pictures of the finished Faculty of Life Science and Earth Science, and the open air theater in the foreground. These are some other academic. This is Faculty of Physics, Chemistry, Maths, and IT. We will explain to you the entire construction also. This is Faculty of Law and Humanities. And you can see the entire roof is where pergola for solar panels is being erected. So roughly, the total, this is just for information, the total load of the campus was about 8 megawatt, out of which 25%, which is about 2 megawatt, is being generated, is envisaged to be generated on campus. So it's a huge area of solar panels which is going to be installed when the project finishes ultimately. This is the Institute of South Asian Studies, which is which is disciplinary center for policy and in the South Asian region. So scholars and postdoctoral scholars from South Asian countries will converge here in order to meet, debate, argue, and come up with policies regarding South Asian regions. Plan of the library, it's actually, that's a picture of the library with a plan. It's a large library building of almost 20,000 square meters, and this has again seating for research, cells for 250 PhD scholars, and also very, very large. Again, so a huge because there was a lot of debate about the fact that it should be such a library or not. But ultimately, in the interest of urbanity and also in the interest of as a surgeon's idea of library failed, because it's not that libraries are becoming more modern, but we're happy that this library building is equipped. The library is for the library is got space. So they were for the day. Just a quick description of this entire idea of how it also gives us enough control on solar radiation, because the window really is only about 2 meter high in the total floor height of 4.5 meter. And we are also able to put precast concrete louvers on the facade, which really cut the solar radiation from at least the exposed sides. So these are, I have gotten familiar with the entire, you can see the admin building, the library under construction, and this is the entire promenade, which really extends from the housing side of the campus to the academic side, and the convention center visible right in the background. You can see the Rajput, Khurd and Madangadi villages much in the background. That's another aerial shot looking towards the housing and the solar in the background. This is the part which actually has been the most problematic one, because this is where we encountered the geomorphological ridge, and it leads you to another set of codes. So it's a very, it was a kind of a part of the project which really got us delayed. So this part of the project hasn't got built. It hasn't even been tendered as yet, and is still running through some kind of encumbrances on land related to ownership, etc. But essentially, you can see that the idea is that it has a central spine. It has hostel type 1 located on the northern edge and hostel type 2 on the southern edge. And hostel type 1 is all where the dining halls are located on the ground floor. So really, the idea is that there are 4 main dining halls, and people, 5,000 students have the option to really go. This is another, from an architect's perspective, our idea was that each dining hall will have a different cuisine from a different region, so people can choose where to eat. We really don't know what it will be in the, eventually when the hostels get built and it gets operationalized. So these are again very high-rise buildings, about 12 to 15, 10 to 12 floors high, housing about 5,000 students. This is hostel type A on the right side, hostel type B on the left. This is a view of hostel type B, which are colonnade and the dining on the ground floor. lastly, the last zone is the housing, which was the large. Actually, there's no types of trees we can essential for a dear city.
Just wanted to check this video was visible to you?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So I'm going to run two more. So this is a video shoot of the academic zone. These are like the DDA, the South Delhi Municipal Corporation, Urban Arts Commission, the Delhi Fire Service, then the environmental clearance from the State Impact Assessment Authority, the National Monument Authority. Since we were located right next to the Asola Wildlife Sanctuary, we had to obtain a NOC from Ministry of Environment and Forests. We also had to interact with Department of Forest and Environment of Delhi government for getting approvals for felling of some trees which were existing on site. Since some of our land was on the ridge, we had to take approval from the Ridge Management Board. The process of getting approval from the Ridge Management Board also involves first finding out from another Delhi government agency that called GSDL how much of your land is ridge and how much is not ridge. Then finally you take it to the Supreme Court's Central Empowered Committee for approval. You also need to take approvals from BACS, IGL, Central Electricity Authority, Jal Board. Then all our designs were proofed, structure designs were proof checked and vetted by IIT Delhi.